Hello, and welcome to Your Best Unleashed. I am your host, Stephanie Jackman. Thank you for taking the opportunity to join me today. Your Best Unleashed is a live broadcast that is designed to give you a message of hope. So I want to thank you again for joining me today. It is my desire that you will be your best physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. If you have not joined my YouTube channel, please take this opportunity to hit that subscribe button and also make sure you hit the notification button so that when I am on live, you will receive notification. Take this opportunity to also share it with your communities. I know that they will find it of value. Today's session is going to be on anxiety, and this is part two of a two-part series on anxiety, and it's entitled Understanding Anxiety. So, our last episode, if you have not had the opportunity to view it, make sure you do so. I gave you some concrete tips in terms of three categories of managing anxiety around mindfulness techniques with anxiety, stress management, and self care practices. So, this is going to be a part two. Make sure you jump on and look at our first episode with part one. We have a series with the big D with depression. We also have mental health in the Black community, and then understanding and managing automatic negative thoughts. So make sure you review those episodes and make sure you share them again with your communities. So we're going to jump right into anxiety for today. On our last episode, I defined anxiety for you around that persistent and chronic fear and worry and stress. And we are going to look at some more skills and some more practical techniques around being able to manage our anxiety. It is key and critical to remember that anxiety is normal. We all have it in some capacity. So, again, whether we're having to do public speaking, whether we're venturing off in a new endeavor or a new project, where we're just stepping outside of our comfort zone. Anxiety is certainly something that is normal and natural. When it becomes a challenge is when it impacts us from a physical standpoint. It impacts us chronically when we're not able to socialize or interact with other people. It impacts us from a work standpoint to where we're not able to perform occupationally or even academically. That's when it impairs our lives. So I want to give you some practical skills today around being able to help manage anxiety. And remember, in part one, I told you that anxiety is the number one diagnosed mental health condition by mental health practitioners such as myself around the world. All right. And anxiety really comes about when we're so worried and thinking about what's happening, not so much in the present, but what's going to happen in the future. And remember here, are we living in the present moment? Excuse me. The present moment. Are we living in the present moment? Are our feet in the present moment? Okay. Most of the time, most of us are not living in the present moment. We are living either, again, in the past. So our feet are often in the past, woulda, coulda, shoulda, or we're so worried about what's going to happen in the future. And so it's key and critical that we remember we have to stay in the present moment. Why? Because that's going to help us manage our anxiety and our thoughts. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about our thoughts today. We talked previously about no one speaks to us more than we speak to ourselves, right? So our thoughts are constantly moving, they're constantly going. And again, I want you to go back to episode one of Your Best Unleashed because I highlighted our unwanted guests. And these are our ants, or are automatic negative thoughts. Okay, our ants. These are our unwanted guests where they cluster together and they're constantly creeping around in our brains and in our minds. So I want you to go back to episode 1 and look at the impact and how we can manage our automatic negative thoughts, because our automatic negative thoughts, or our ants, actually impact our anxiety levels. Okay, there are thoughts that we have, and those thoughts are called ruminations. And we all have them. They're called ruminating thoughts. And for today's episode, I am going to give you what my working definition of ruminating thoughts are going to be. And ruminating thoughts for today's purposes are negative thoughts that continue to whirl around in our brain and in our mind, and we dwell on the negative and potential negative outcomes or consequences of what is going to happen or what we're getting ready to embark on. So let me give you some examples of what I mean when I say ruminating thoughts that swirl around and increase our anxiety before we even begin to embark on something. So here's a couple of examples. You will never be able to do that. You're not good enough. There's somebody else out there that can do it better than you can. Everybody's going to be looking at you. What if you say the wrong thing? Now, again, no one else are saying these things to us. These are the messages that we're telling ourselves. And as a result of these messages that we're telling ourselves, then our anxiety level goes up, right? So how do we manage that? How do we kind of capture those negative ruminating thoughts? Well, today, again, I'm going to give you a practical concept and a practical skill to be able to combat anxiety. Again, we all have it, but it's a matter of accepting it first. And it's also a matter of being able to accept the fact that we all have thoughts that are negative and contradictory to what we want to act upon. Anxiety related feelings can feel very overwhelming and they can be endless at times. So it's key and critical to remember that some degree of anxiety is normal. We also have to remember that there are some things about life and things that we're getting ready to embark on that we're just going to have to accept. Okay. So today we are going to talk about accept. I want you to see this acronym here that I have. And accept right here is ACCEPTS. And we're going to put accepts up. And that acronym is going to stand for activities, contributing, comparisons, emotions, pushing away, thoughts, and sensations. So even with anxiety, there's some things that we are going to have to accept. And that's our working acronym for today's Your Best Unleash. So we're going to jump right in. All right. Let's talk about the A. There's the A. You know, I like props. I like visuals, because when you see this A, I want you to begin to think about what is it that I can do to help overcome and combat some of my feelings of anxiety. So for A stands for activities. So when all these swirling thoughts are going on, I'm not good enough, I'm fearful, I'm afraid, there's somebody else out there that can do it better than I can, I want you to begin to do some type of activities, whatever that is, some type of leisure, enjoyable activities for such as yourself. For yourself. So when I talk to my patients, believe it or not, adults are loving to begin to color. All right. So coloring is an activity. Reading a book, reading the Bible, all of those things are activities that we can embark on. Last episode, I spoke with you about the gratitude journals that I have. Write in a journal in order to be able to combat some of those anxiety related thoughts. Okay. Also, many of us have some DIY projects that we need to be embarking on. Jump on a project that you need to do, whether it's for your home, a project for work, even for school. You can do those things in terms of being able to subside some of those anxiety related thoughts and some of those negative ruminating thoughts that we may have. Again, we all have them because at some point we're all struggling with some type of self-doubt. Okay. These activities will help us to become distracted, and then we will be able to step back from feeling so anxious. All right. Again, we can also engage in some type of physical activity around exercise, running on our treadmill, going for a walk. So, again, the A is for activities. Engage in some type of leisure and fun activities. All right. Next, C. Again, our acronym for today is accept. There's some things in life that we have to accept, that they are what they are. It is what it is. Believe it or not, we don't have any control over a lot of things that's occurring in our lives. And I know that may be anxiety provoking for a lot of you all out there, but it's reality. It's true. We only can do what it is that we can do. So the C, accepts. Those are contributing. How are we contributing to society? How are we contributing outside of ourselves? Oftentimes we spend so much focus on thinking about ourselves that we need to begin to think more other centered as opposed to being so self-centered. We need to think about being other centered. So how are we contributing to other people's lives? All right. How are we focused on others? Well, here's some thoughts. Can we reach out via phone? Yes, the phone. Pick up the phone and call someone that's on your mind, someone that you haven't spoken with in a long time. Pick up the phone and reach out to them. You can pick up the phone and send a text message, of course. Shoot them an email. Can we go old school and send them a card in the mail via snail mail? All right. So let's begin to think outside of ourselves. When we're thinking outside of ourselves, our situation in our lives perhaps won't seem so bad after all. Can we look at volunteering in a different capacity? There's so many other capacities that we can begin to volunteer and serve others. Serve others outside of ourselves. Again, we're living in a world today to where we're oftentimes thinking me, as opposed to what about other people? All right. So volunteering and spending some of that time with others so that it can then allow us to feel that we are making a contribution. And that will then decrease some of those feelings of anxiety. I tell you, when we're serving and giving to others, it's less about ourselves, which will then take away the anxiety feelings. And it becomes more about those in which we're serving and those who are in need. That is so key and critical. So let's step outside of ourselves. The more we focus on others, the less we will feel anxious. Okay. There's a whole world out there that needs us, and we bring something to the table for others that have a need. All right. So that C is contributing. And again, in another C, here we are. We have another C. It's there. All right. Comparisons. I often will tell my patients, let's not compare, because in comparison, there's always a feeling of less than or inadequacy. But in this instance, I want us to compare so that we can reduce feelings of anxiety. So, comparison. I want us all to begin to think about a time where our situation was worse and more stressful than what it is today. And if we really stop and think about it, we all can think of one where outside of today, in this present moment, where has God brought us from? Okay. a time that was more stressful, more distressing, more intense. And guess what? We made it on the other side. We're still here today to talk about it. We're even here today to tell someone about how we made it over that hurdle or how we made it over that challenge or that obstacle. So today doesn't necessarily have to look that bad because perhaps a previous time a situation was looking really bleak and really grim and dismal, but we made it through it. Okay? So that is a way that we can show our resiliency around being able to overcome obstacles. If you've been watching Your Best Unleashed from episode 1, I certainly can say for myself that I feel less anxious today on this episode than I did the first episode, believe it or not. And again, to normalize anxiety, we all have feelings of anxiety. That first episode was very anxiety provoking for me. Why? Because I didn't know if anybody was going to watch. I didn't know if I was going to get any views. I didn't know if I was going to say the right thing, the wrong thing. Was the Wi-Fi going to go out? Were we going to have a windstorm and the internet was going to disconnect? So many things could happen. But I can truly tell you today that I feel less anxious today than I did on episode 1. So oftentimes we have to venture out and we have to make that first step because we never know what's going to happen if we don't take the initial step. We're not leaving room for success. We're not leaving room for growth. All right. So I'm going to encourage you, for all of those that are having some feelings of doubt or anxiety about embarking on this new thing, I'm going to encourage you to take that leap of faith and do it. Just jump out there and do it. There's no right or wrong. Just do it. Right. So think about how resilient we can be. All right. Also, think about a time that God has really brought you through a challenging situation and look at where you are today. So that's the second C in accept. Again, there's some things in life we just have to accept. Next, the E, emotions, our emotions. How do we navigate our emotions? Anxiety is a feeling, right? Yes, our emotions are valid. Yes, they are valid. They are a valid experience, but that doesn't necessarily mean that our emotions have to take over. All right. It doesn't mean they have to take over. So let's talk about the E with emotions. Do something that can create a new emotion for you outside of feeling anxiety. So if we're feeling anxious, take the opportunity to do something different. If you're feeling anxious, then it's important that you spend some time doing something that brings you joy. So watch a movie that brings you joy. Spend time with a friend or a loved one that you enjoy, because that's going to shed off some of those feelings of anxiety. All right. Go for a walk, run on the treadmill. All of those things can decrease our feelings of anxiety. Okay. You can also engage in some deep breathing exercises. Remember, I told you in part 1 of understanding anxiety that those are all mindfulness activities. Those are all mindfulness activities. So deep breathing exercises. You want to breathe, deep breathing from your diaphragm, okay? So you want to do 4 seconds where we inhale, and then 4 seconds and you hold it, and then you exhale. So again, 4 seconds inhale, and then you exhale. Those are deep breathing exercises to be able to help us self-regulate our emotions and our feelings. Again, on episode our last episode with part 1 of understanding anxiety, I gave you some grounding techniques, okay? And I'm going to give you some more grounding techniques momentarily. But if you didn't catch part 1 of understanding anxiety, make sure you go back with those grounding techniques, okay? Those are key and critical for us. All right, so that's emotions. In terms, again, our emotions are valid, but they don't have to overtake us. Next, the P. Here's the P in accept. Again, we're accepting some things today. P is pushing away those feelings of anxiety, literally and figuratively. Okay. So when I mean figuratively, in terms of pushing away feelings of anxiety, what I mean by that is doing some imagery. Imagine yourself pushing the anxiety outside of your body. Imagine yourself putting the anxiety in a box and putting the lid on it, even if it's just for 15-20 minutes, so that you can be able to regroup. So you're pushing away the anxiety literally and figuratively. You're putting the anxiety in a box. You're putting the lid on the anxiety, okay? Now, what does that mean? You're going to, again, engage in some activities that's going to push away those negative thoughts that we all have. The negative thoughts of, I'm not good enough. Somebody else can do it better than I can. The negative thoughts of, what if I make a mistake? Everybody's going to be looking at me. Negative thoughts that I've had. If I build it, will they come, right? So if I start this broadcast, will they watch? Will I get views? All right. Will I get subscribers? All of those things, even for myself as a therapist, are normal. Okay. But again, we do not allow room for success or room for growth if we don't jump out and embark on the opportunity. Okay. So again, pushing it away, push them away, push those feelings of anxiety away. Because again, anxiety can be overwhelming. It can be stressful. All right. It can kind of feel endless, but there is a stopping point to it. If we're willing to engage in pleasurable activities, if we can check our emotions, all right. If we can then be a contributor to other people's lives. So those things are really, really key. All right. Next, going back to the T. Our thoughts. What are our thoughts? All right. When our emotions are high, our intellect is low. So we don't want to so much get caught up in our emotions. Again, yes, our emotions are valid. They are valid. Our feelings are valid. But with emotions come thoughts. And oftentimes our thoughts can be very negative when our emotions are high. So when we're angry, our thoughts can be very counterproductive. Okay. So we want to be able to get our thoughts in check, because then that will help us get our emotions in check. So our thoughts, let's shift from negative thoughts and ruminating thoughts and automatic negative thoughts. And let's focus again. A grounding technique for us is shifting and using our senses. So here's an example of another grounding technique. Let's look at the letter A. Start with A. What in our environment do we see that starts with the letter A? This is going to help us refocus. It's going to help us regroup, so that, again, we're not having these ruminating thoughts that's causing us to be so anxious and so distressed. So what in the room do we see that starts with the letter A? What in the room do we see that starts with the letter B? What in the room that we see that starts with the letter C? Until we can get ourselves back grounded all the way through Z. All right. Those are skills to be able to stop us in terms of those automatic negative thoughts and ruminating thoughts. Because again, automatic negative thoughts and ruminating thoughts, 99% of the time they are negative. and they will then cause increased anxiety without having any facts. That's the power of our brain. That it's one of the most powerful muscles, but it all depends on how we choose to utilize it and what we put in. So what we put in is going to come out. All right. So again, A to Z, look around our environment and see, what do we see in the room that starts with the letter A? What do we see in our environment that starts with the letter B? What is in our room that starts with the letter C? So on and so forth. That's going to help us become more grounded and more centered and more focused. All right. Another one for our thoughts is, again, counting specific objects in our environment. Okay. How many bricks do we see on our home? How many trees are outside our window? Okay. How many hangers are in our closet? All of those things are to be able to help us refocus and regroup. Okay. To be able to help us navigate and get control of our thoughts. Right. That's the T. Next, our last one is the S. Okay. The S is our sensations. What are our sensations? And again, regarding anxiety, it's about those physical sensations in our bodies. Okay. So we all have physical sensations. Remember in episode 1 of Big D, I spoke with you about that depression lives and resides in our bodies, right? Well, it's the same as anxiety. Anxiety lives and resides in our bodies. Well, some of you may be saying, what do you mean, Stephanie? You may see someone biting their nails because they're anxious. You may see someone fidgeting, right? Their whole body is shaking, or they're rocking, or they're moving like this, right? Because that's anxiety. You may see their leg moving or twitching, right? You may see them scratching and moving like this. You may see them picking their fingernails. You may see them chomping on a pen, right? All of those things oftentimes are indications of anxiety, because anxiety lives physically in our bodies. So again, I want to give you some skills that once you begin to feel those feelings of anxiety, the heart palpitations, the ruminating thoughts, our hands beginning to sweat, our leg beginning to shake, we're beginning to fidget. I want to give you some skills to be able to help you again recenter yourself and refocus. All right. So another one for those physical sensations, the sensations. First one that I want to give you is literally go and hold a cold ice cube in your hand. That's going to help you focus from here in your brain to the cold ice cube in your hand. All right. And literally just hold it, because the cold ice cube versus the warmth in your hand, you're going to begin to be able to redirect your thought processes and your focus. So literally go into your freezer, get an ice cube when you're feeling anxious, and put it in your hand. Some of you may be saying, Stephanie, I'm not around an ice cube when I feel most anxious. Okay, no problem. Here's another tip and another skill for you to be able to do. Before you start that public speaking presentation in front of your team at work, before you have to make a presentation in front of the board of directors, before you have to go and speak before your church or congregation, whatever it is, go into the bathroom, put your hands under ice cold water. That's going to be able to help regulate those feelings of anxiety and feelings of feeling overwhelmed and fearful. Run your hands under cold water, front and back, for about 45 seconds or so. That's going to help you to be able to refocus and regroup. Okay. So put your hands right under the sink under cold water, as cold as you can tolerate it, okay? That's going to be able to help you to redirect your focus. And then next, and lastly, perhaps you may need to eat something that has a sour taste to it or a spicy taste. That again will help you refocus and redirect those anxiety related feelings, okay? So, those are some tips and some skills for you that I have for you around today's acronym of ACCEPT. All right. So, A is for activities, C is for contributing, C is for comparisons, E is for emotions, P is for pushing away, T is for thoughts, S is for sensation. Again, remember, nobody talks to us more than we talk to ourselves. And we have to be really mindful of our thoughts and really mindful of the messages that we are telling ourselves. Because if not, the anxiety can paralyze us so that we're not willing, able, or desire to be capable to embark on that next new thing that's designed for us. Okay. All right. So, again, I want to thank you for taking this opportunity for joining me today on Your Best Unleashed. I hope you found today's episode helpful. I hope you found today's skills applicable for you. And I want to thank you for joining me. Make sure that if you have not subscribed to Your Best Unleashed, please take this opportunity to do so. Also, share Your Best Unleashed with your communities. And I will look forward to seeing you on our next episode of Your Best Unleashed. Have a great day, and thank you again.